Welcome to the latest GMG webinar. Today we'll be talking about the foundations of artificial intelligence in mining, which was the recent white paper released last year. So this white paper came out of a number of discussions at GMG workshops and forums, where education in artificial intelligence was viewed as one of the top priorities of the artificial intelligence working group. The intention of this white paper is to essentially frame the AI discussion in a mining context, and its intended audience is the mining companies themselves. For example, we gave it to our CEO, who was well impressed and is using this now as a resource throughout top level management. So to put this white paper in the wider GMG context, there are a number of working groups that the GMG have currently got a project running in, and whenever we look at these working groups and projects, we can see how pervasive artificial intelligence is, in that it kind of seeps into a lot of these other areas as well. So autonomous mining obviously is a huge one, but things like cybersecurity, underground mining, asset management, artificial intelligence is part of a lot of these other areas. And groups like interoperability and data access and usage, they're looking at ways in which we can better use that data, and that is core to some of the issues in artificial intelligence as well. So how do we define artificial intelligence? Well, the actual term artificial intelligence was coined in the 50s by John McCarthy, and he actually later regretted actually calling it artificial intelligence, simply because it's a kind of catch-all, and it doesn't actually reflect accurately what the field does. I think it's important to differentiate between two different aspects of AI. One of them is narrow AI, and narrow AI is a collection of techniques that allows automation by machines. So what we're trying to do here is mimic aspects of human intelligence, not all of human intelligence, but just aspects of human intelligence. So things like Siri or route map finding on Google Maps, they are applications of narrow AI. Then the other part is artificial general intelligence, and that's the kind of theoretical machine that has human cognitive abilities, and so that's the kind of Hollywood style AI vision, if you like. It's killer robots, it's a singularity, it's HAL, it's the robots taking over the world type idea. For this discussion, we're just looking at narrow AI, because that is going to give us the benefits of AI today. So within artificial intelligence, there are a number of different areas, and machine learning is probably the biggest part of artificial intelligence at the moment. Machine learning takes data and tries to learn patterns from that data. So within machine learning, there's deep learning, which essentially is using deep layers of a network in order to perform some more complicated tasks. So deep learning is instrumental to machine vision, for example. One of the interesting issues with terms in AI is what's the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence and data science. So for this white paper, basically we've defined data science as the analytics that you might perform in order to gain some kind of insight. So whereas machine learning might be an application that you might run, for example, fatigue management, data science may well be something where you look at some data and you produce a report, you gain some insight out of that, and then you implement some action. The other term that's come across recently is big data, and really big data is just data that's big. It's the same techniques, you just have to deal with a lot of data, and so it's really not any different from any other AI or machine learning techniques. One of the things in the white paper that we focused on quite a lot, and basically made a focus at the beginning of the white paper, was how important the human factor was in the whole process of implementing AI. The human factor comes into play at the very beginning of the process, in that you need to identify and gather the data in order to put it into and building an AI model. You need experts that understand the process as well, because essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to mimic those processes and those experts, and so you need to identify that early. So you may build your AI model and you're going to get some results at the end of that. At the end of the day, you also need somebody to use those results. So you need somebody to implement what those results are saying, or interpret it, or assess it. So the beginning at the end of this process, there are people. So we need to remember that things like change management and communications are really key in this whole process. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make people's jobs easier, safer, and more pleasant. So in order to try and gauge where an organization is in their journey with implementing AI, we put together a maturity framework, and this is based off the capability maturity model that Humphreys put together in the 80s. And it shows the progressive stages of maturity that an organisation might go through. What we'll do is we'll just go through them very briefly. So at the basic level, an organisation is essentially just exploring the possibility and trying to understand the benefits of AI. At this level, an organisation may well be using AI packaged solutions, but not actually know that it's artificial intelligence, and neither should they need to know. So even autonomy of vehicles is essentially a packaged solution. At this stage, what is very important is that whatever work is done aligns with the organization's digital transformation program. So really, if an organization is at the point where they haven't digitized their information, then they're not going to get the benefits out of AI, because they're not going to have the rich data that is needed in order to gain those benefits. So once an organization's decided, yep, this is good for us, we're going to do something, then how do you start? So really, experimentation and investigation is the way to go, and to build up some pilot studies. So at the end of the day, an organization needs to understand the impact of the people, the processes and technologies, and so the best way of going about that is a proof of concept, or more targeted, a proof of value. And a proof of value is basically looking at what business benefit, how much am I going to save, how much am I going to make out of this. There has to be value in what you're doing, otherwise why do it? And so at this stage we're basically going through a number of different experiments, and it's important to remember that you may not get it right the first time. It's about learning, so it may take a couple of different attempts at different problems, using different partners, looking at the problem differently, just so that you can get the understanding that you need to. So by the time you've gone through those pilots, you've presumably got the backing of some major sponsors within your organisation, and you're ready to roll this out on a bigger scale. If you're going to start to integrate this into your operations, then data is key to doing that. So you need to start thinking about the decisions that you need to make about your platform, your infrastructure, and the skills that are going to be required in order to make this happen. As we said before, change management is key here, because you're now going to start looking at different processes, and it is essential to get strong vision, strong leadership in order to push this through. By the time you get to a level 4, you've managed to put a lot of advanced analytical tools into your organization. So some key changes that you'll find at this stage were outlined in a Harvard Business Review article. And they're the changes from siloed work to interdisciplinary collaboration. So no longer can we just work in our own separate departments. We really need to work across the board in order to get the benefits out of this. And that goes for an awful lot of other business benefits as well. We also need to move from an experience-based, leader-driven decision-making to data-driven decision-making at the front line. And whenever we're looking at processes and we're automating those processes, there's no need anymore to have a report that we basically put up to top-level management for them to make decisions. Those decisions have already been made at the front line, and we're using data to actually make those decisions. And the third one is to move from a rigid and risk-averse organisation to one that's agile, experimental and adaptable. Now, this doesn't mean that we then move away from risk-averse from the point of safety. That safety is always going to be topmost in the mining industry. But when we look at decision making, because we're making decisions based on data, we can then drive those decisions in a more agile and adaptable manner. And finally, there's the Nirvana, where we've got a fully automated organisation where AI is at the core of that organisation. There's minimal manual intervention. So what we've done is we've gone through the process of distilling what is the best world scenario for each different process. So we don't need to manually intervene anymore because we're using data in order to make those decisions. So we've really got a lot of integrated autonomous systems throughout our whole business. What is important at this stage is continuous improvement. Because we've got a lot of systems producing a lot of data, we can use that data now to continuously improve our systems, which will provide us with better data, which will give us that positive continuous improvement cycle. So how do we implement an AI project? So I think the first thing to identify is that implementing an AI project should be no different than implementing any other digital project that you're working on. This is just one more tool in your toolbox. So whenever you're looking at a problem, it's going to be in the same way that you're going to look at other problems that you might have. You're going to assess it in the same manner. One of the key differentiators when you're implementing AI projects is around data. So you've got to analyze whether or not you've got that data, whether or not it's available for you to even to consider using AI for this project. You may have that data, you may decide that yes, you can go ahead with this, but you still have issues around how you're going to store it and organize data, and how you're going to collect it. How does that data look? A recent study estimated that the first AI project an organisation might undertake will spend 80% of their time on this data process. Now, that's the first time. Once you get through that process the first time, and once you've got those learnings, and once you've got recipes and patterns that will actually help you along there, then that is obviously going to decrease as you increase the number of different projects that you do. So whenever you're running any project, not just a pilot project, what is key is the idea of iteration. AI projects and machine learning projects will start with an idea, we'll run through creating a few models, we'll have a look and see what the output is, and then we'll iterate. And we'll keep iterating until there is an outcome which either works or all the possibilities have been explored. So this idea of iterating is key whenever you're looking at a project that involves artificial intelligence and machine learning. So one of the key differentiators in AI projects is how do you validate your findings. So it's very important before you start a project that you know exactly how you're going to validate those outcomes. And this is because AI projects tend to be harder to actually understand the outcomes, because we're doing things which we can't do in any other manner. We have to be very clear about how we're going to test and how we're going to validate that the output is actually what we expect it to be. Often questions arise around how do we build a team? Do we use internal or do we use external resources? And it's really a bit of a trade-off between the two of them. So using internal resources will mean that those resources know the organisation. They understand it well. If you do a project, those people will be staying in your organisation. You can reuse those learnings. But do those people have the necessary skills in order to do these projects? Whereas external resources can accelerate your adoption of AI. They have the skills. Do they have the internal knowledge? How do you enable that transfer of internal knowledge? So really, you're probably going to need a mix of both, and that mix may change over time. So you might begin with more external resources while you're training up internal resources. Even if you're going for a while, there may be a specific project where you bring in the external resources because you don't have that skill set. So really, there's no one solution that fits all organizations. To a certain extent, the benefits of an AI project are similar to the benefits of any other digital project, with one key difference, in that AI will be able to unlock advanced applications which you may not have been able to do using any other method. So I'll give an example of machine vision, in that fatigue management will use machine vision to check for distraction events. Now, a machine can check a human to make sure the human's not falling asleep, because the machine's not going to fall asleep. It's not the sort of thing that you could actually have another process where a human looks at a human to make sure they're not falling asleep, because they might fall asleep. So it's an application where we just couldn't do it before. And again, the success factors are going to be very similar to success factors of normal digital projects, with, again, that focus on the data. The quality of the data is going to be key in order for you to successfully go through this process. Now, it's not a silver bullet to all the problems you're going to have. There are challenges and there are issues and risks with using AI, and some of the more common ones are shown here. So ethics and trust is a very common issue. When we have data and we're putting them through algorithms, we can actually bias our outcomes based on the data or the algorithms that we're using. And common examples in the press have been how algorithms bias against certain aspects of society. It can be biased against colour or race, but that doesn't just mean we're biasing against people. We could bias algorithms against equipment, for example. So if we only put crusher 1 information into our algorithm, then we're biased against any other crushers, for example. The common standards and platforms are obviously important in that we don't want to be spinning our wheels constantly. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel. So we need to have that common standard platforms, and because AI is constantly moving, is constantly being updated, it's very hard to actually set those standards. And of course there's technical risk. It is a fast-moving part of computer science. Do we actually understand what artificial intelligence is? Do we understand how to do a machine learning project? Are we going to make a mistake which basically gives us an outcome which is not what was expected? And again, the people and culture side of it is extremely important, because we need to bring along our people. We need to change our culture such that this is not seen as a technology which is to be feared, but it's something which is going to benefit not only the whole organization, but the people as well within that organization. So let's have a look at a few applications of AI and machine learning within the mining industry. I mean, the first one, obviously, that comes to mind is autonomous vehicles. It was an early use of AI and machine learning within the mining industry, and it's something which is gaining adoption, not just in autonomous trucks, but in drills. We've seen in rail, and just in the factories, in the plants. We're seeing more and more autonomous vehicles and robots. Predictive maintenance is an area which has also seen benefits out of using this data. So this is where we have sensors on the machines giving us constant information about what's happening to the machine. And if we can use historical component failure records, then we can potentially predict when a component is going to fail. This means that we don't need to keep with scheduled maintenance, but we can actually run it until we actually need to perform maintenance. So essentially what we're trying to do is to prevent downtime, but also to run the machine more efficiently. Already mentioned the fatigue management application with machine vision, but there's an awful lot of other areas where machine vision is used. This is one aspect of machine learning which is very well suited to computers, and so decision support, monitoring and recording of repetitive tasks, draft survey, these are all machine vision applications which work really well. Safety is something which is obviously foremost in any mining operator's mind, and there are a number of different areas of which safety can actually be addressed with machine learning. And so there's a few examples here. One of the interesting ones recently on dam disasters was a recent paper which analysed a number of tailing dams to see if any of these disasters could actually be avoided. And by using data from different dams, the outcome of that study was yes, these disasters could be avoided if we use a lot of the data from different organisations. So thank you very much for listening. We'll just go over to some questions.
Thank you, Rob. Very interesting presentation. So now we're going to kick off with the Q&A portion of the webinar. So we have one question from Dario. He wants to know more specific mining example for these concepts.
Very good question. That's actually one of the projects that has been kicked off to specifically look at the applications and to get some more detail. There's actually, I don't know if you're going to be at SME or in Denver in 2 weeks' time, there's a forum in Denver, and we're going to be specifically talking about that. Andrew Scott's going to lead that discussion to specifically look in depth at the learnings of the projects to be able to kind of give everyone else an idea of what we can do. So yeah, and definitely if you want to get involved, please get in touch with the GMG guys, and they'll put you in touch with the leader of that project.
We have a question from Craig. How are you calculating value for AI proof of values and articulating this to the business?
So that's going to be very different depending on the application. So can you basically, and it's all going around modeling. Can you model your process to say that by changing these parameters, you're going to be able to be, save 5% of time at a digger, or 5 minutes, so 5 minutes loading or 2 minutes loading. Or it's very, very much a case of having to model that process and to be able to get the savings. In that instance, it's no different from any other project that you might be running. You've got to do that. What is the process at the moment, and how do we do this afterwards? And it's a good point, because you really need to think about that before you start this project. You need to have that baseline, and you need to know how you're going to measure it afterwards, because if you can't measure it, then, as you say, it's hard to actually prove your value.
We have a question from Mark O, and he's asking if you think that this AI stuff is just another buzzword that will disappear soon.
Well, I mean, the reality is it's Mark can pull out his iPhone and he can have a look at it, and he can stop using Siri if he thinks it's just a buzzword. It's here, and that's the bottom line. In the 60s and 70s, AI was predicting times for airplanes to leave and to land. AI was doing machine letter recognition on postcodes for the post office. It's already here, and that ship is well and truly sailed. I think the question is, how pervasive is it going to become in our lives? And I think if we just focus on the narrow AI as a tool set, I think that it's going to be hugely important in our industry and in our personal lives.
Thanks. We have another one from Paolo. He's asking, data quality in the mining industry is a big issue. What strategies for assessment and improvement would you suggest?
Well, I think like everything else, you've got to start somewhere. And in our own organization, one of the things that we found is by starting with a pilot and incorporating our operational staff, they could start to see what we were trying to do, and they could see how the data that they are responsible for, how important it is in that process. And so I think a lot of it is actually empowering your people, and again we come back to people, in understanding what that data is going to be used for. And you're quite right, we have these problems as well, but I think a lot of the time people are responsible for that data, and if they really know what is it getting used for, I think you can start to find that your fields aren't getting, your work orders now are getting filled out because somebody knows that that's going to actually make a difference. So I think that's really important, is to take your people on the journey, and you can begin starting there. And whenever you run through a project, that's a good point to find out that this project only had 70% accuracy. I mean, it's not a failure. Maybe you were expecting 90% accuracy. It's not a failure if you look at it and say, well, one of the reasons is that we actually thought we had better data than what we have now. So I think you've got to start somewhere, and it's incremental. You can make incremental changes. A lot of people can consider this as a big bang approach. It's definitely not big bang. It's a long process. It's a long journey, and you've got to start somewhere. And by identifying those points of improvement, you can continually improve your operations.
So we have one last question. How do mining companies attract and retain talent to support AI initiatives when competing against large technology companies?
That's a great question, actually. Last year in CIM, one of the keynotes was talking about the mining industry and the concept that people had and the view that people had that, I think mining was one of the worst 10 jobs that you could have. But I think that concept comes from an outdated idea about what the mining industry is. It comes from the idea that people have still got pickaxes, and it's still maybe some places that is the case. But mining is a fantastic area to get involved because the technology and the ability to use technology is huge. The amount of data that mining companies produce is unbelievable. The diversity of the data is unbelievable. The workflow that you go from exploration all the way through to production to shipping, it's a huge demand chain. And I think, experts love to get their teeth into big problems. And mining has big problems on a big scale to solve. And I think you have to concentrate on, these are problems which, AI is so well suited for, and there's so many opportunities. And I think that's where you focus on, and that's where you get people in, and that's where you get people excited. You need to get people excited, and people get excited by problems to solve. And so that would be my advice.
Great, thank you. We have 2 additional questions. And just for you to know, Matthew, we also are going to launch in GMG a new working group in Q2 called Workforce of the Future. That is one of the areas that we will be tackling, the attract and retain of talent in mining. So we have a question from Jacqueline. Are there areas that you see companies could benefit from collaboration versus competition? As in my experience, as companies are uncertain about AI, they're not open to sharing today.
Yeah, that's interesting. Once you hit the lawyer level in every company, things start to change a wee bit. So one of the projects that we're looking at the moment is open data, and open data is all about trying to get data sets from companies that we provide guidelines on how to take out the sensitive information, and I think what we need to do is, as part of that project, one of the challenges is to be able to prove to people that it is benefiting everybody. A rising tide lifts all boats, and I think that is the mantra that we need to push. That each company may have a competitive advantage in some certain area, but a lot of the stuff that we're doing, we can collaborate, and it's not going to actually make a difference between one and the other. It's actually going to help individual companies by collaborating, and I think that's really what we need to do. There's already work on common standards, and I think it's something that's going to benefit everyone. It comes down to value propositions. If we can have a very clear value proposition on what we're trying to do to collaborate, that is something that we can actually take to our leadership groups and to say, this is actually going to give our individual companies value. And I think that's something that we need to concentrate. But it is, as you say, it is something that is first and foremost behind any collaborative effort, is to be able to prove that collaboration value.
Great, thank you. And we have one other question. We have some model to follow. Some region or mining company taking advantage of AI benefits or developing this?
Sorry, can you say the question again? Sorry, I didn't get the gist of it.
The question is, do we have some model to follow? Some region or mining company taking advantage of AI benefits or developing this?
So I take that to be, again, do we have some use cases or some examples of how this has been successful? If that's the question, then again, the applications in the AI project is really looking at that, is really looking at more detail and getting some of those learnings out, because if we can share those learnings, then I think it's a template that we can move forward on. I hope that answered the question.
Perfect, thank you. So I think we don't have any more questions on the line. So maybe we can start wrapping up.
Dominica, actually, there's one from Shane. Can we use the GMG forum to help facilitate transfer learning in mining?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're setting up regular calls. We're setting up forums, and it's all about trying to have those one-on-one conversations and trying to break down the barriers between individual organizations. So absolutely, and that's what this is all about.
Great, thank you. Just echoing Heather as well, where Rob will be on the panel at the upcoming SME Convention Monday afternoon on the AI in mining, along with others who are on this call tonight. So don't miss on this opportunity if you are able to attend to the SME Convention. So I think that will be the last question. Thank you everybody for attending. So just as Rob was saying, GMG is holding an applications of AI in mining workshop in Denver on February 27th. The workshop aims to tackle main challenges during AI adoption and define common practices proven to work for AI in mining. Afterwards, we will elaborate a guideline based on the outcomes of the workshop, so those with an interest can go to our website and register. Thank you, Rob, again, and thank you everybody for attending today. The recording will be available in our YouTube channel within the coming weeks, and hope you have a great night or day depending on your region.